choice.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Community Connect. Today I'm joined by someone who is a powerhouse of talent, Simren Lalani. She's a Pakistani American actress who began her career at the age of 15, and since then she's had an incredible journey. We're lucky to have her here in the studio with us to talk about her journey and share some lessons along the way. Hi Simren.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Simran, before we kind of get into all the amazing work that you've done, I want to ask you, tell me about the 15-year-old Simran. What was she like? What were her dreams? And, tell us a bit more about the early journey of your life.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, it's been a minute since I've talked about me being 15, but fearless. I feel like I've always been very fearless. At some point that was knocked out of me and then I found it again, thankfully. But I knew very early on that I liked to make people happy and I liked to make people laugh and I liked to bring people together and entertain, I guess you can say. So that was a big part of my life. And luckily I was, given, I was someone who went after what my curiosities were. And at the time it was modeling and fashion. And so I decided to embrace that and embark on that journey. And then luckily I found acting, which is the other side of it. So, 15-year-old Simren was never shy. She was never timid. She was very curious and she was bold and she was fearless and courageous. So, and I think that's, a lot more of who I've become today. So I'm grateful for that because I realized that not a lot of 15-year-olds are like that. And if you're given that courage, then you should share that with others so that maybe they can find their courage too.
And Simran, of course, like you're talking about finding your passion at such a young age, which on one hand is amazing, but on the other hand, it's being able to follow that passion and at such a young age and navigating, family dynamics, social dynamics, that cannot have been an easy thing for you.
Oh, no.
It's not easy for anybody.
No.
So, I want to ask you about that because I think there are a lot of young people, especially young girls, that, any time that they want to do something different, something that's perhaps not have been done in their family before, a career such as acting, to say at that age that, this is something I want to do. How do you find the courage and, what would you say to someone who's at that age and going through a similar feeling as you have been through?
I think something I realized, and I realized this later on in life, because at the time I didn't realize I was being bold and fearless and courageous. I was just being. But later on, I learned that whenever I had moved to LA to, follow my dreams of being an actress and being a fashion designer. And whenever I would come back and visit, I had people that I grew up with approach me and be like, you're so lucky that you're getting to go out there and live your dream. You're so lucky. You're so lucky. You're the only one that's going to get out of here. And that would confuse me because, when they would tell me that, at that point, I was living out of my car. I was couch surfing. I was pretty much homeless. I could barely afford food. I was making sandwiches out of bread and cheese for a whole month because I could only afford the cheese tray and white bread. Don't even touch white bread anymore or cheese, but, those were the conditions I was living in at that time. And it wasn't the whole time, but that was a period in my life. And so I was always very confused when people would tell me, oh, you're so lucky to be going out there and chasing your dream. And I wish back then I would have said, I'm not lucky. I'm just not afraid of what adversity I have to overcome to get to where I need to be.
Yeah.
Because all of those experiences gave me resilience. It gave me strength. It made me figure out who I was even more. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to go through those hardships and those that suffering to come out on the other side stronger and just learn to survive in the world while building your dream. I didn't care to be comfortable at my parents' home here in this wonderful city, but I didn't care to be comfortable. I wanted to get out there and I wanted to figure out life on my own and learn to not only survive but thrive on my own. And I think you have to learn to survive in order to figure out how to thrive.
Yeah.
Because if you're in your comfort zone and you're never learning how to survive, how are you ever going to get to the thriving?
Yeah.
So I think I would say if you're curious about something and there's something that calls to your heart and is heavy on your heart, and if you're not happy in the life maybe that you've settled for, then follow those curiosities, because you never know where it will take you. It's not going to be always pretty, but you have to get through that to get to the other side.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just avoid the hardship and they're like, I'll take the easy way route and settle for what's in front of me rather than what's over the mountain.
Yeah. And I think, as you're saying, I also feel like sometimes people glorify the struggle period as well.
Yeah.
And, the way you're talking about it, I mean, it's something that you're living in and day out. And it's easier, said than done. Because to say that, I was making sandwiches and I was being homeless, I mean, that's a reality, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to kind of look back at it and be like, oh, I came out of it. But I really feel like, that's shows so much resilience on your part. But let's get back to your work. So tell us about the first project. So you were passionate about acting, modeling. So where did you go from there? What's the first project? How did it come to you? And how was your first experience?
So initially, I had submitted a picture of myself to an agency out here called Page Parks Acting and Modeling, which I then went on to be an acting coach at when I came back from LA. So that was pretty cool. But I had submitted a picture to be a model because I wanted to do runway. They had called me in months later, and I remember the exact moment when I got that call, what road I was on, what turn I was making in Sugarland. And I had saved their number because I was like, I'm going to be in touch with them one day whenever I'm ready. So I'm going to save this number. And so I knew exactly who was calling. And, they told me that they wanted me to come in and, do a little audition. So I went in and I thought this was just going to be for modeling. But when I got there, they told me that I was too short to be a runway model, but I could try acting and try acting classes. And so they put me on camera and had me read a commercial, and that was the beginning of it. And I just fell in love with being on camera because I had never thought about that even being an option for us, being Pakistani. And, modeling was I think that came from my love for fashion and just dressing up and style. But I never thought, I can, tell stories and create stories and act and be in films and movies. And I was obsessed with films and TV shows and everything at that time, but I didn't put the two and two together until they offered me that chance. And that's when I was like, that is an option. So I started taking acting classes. They do this thing called agent review where they have a bunch of agents and casting directors come and you do a showcase. And that's where I got my first introduction to a casting director who then had a workshop, who then started to do a film casting for a short film they were doing. So that's how I got my first short film. And then we made a sequel to that. So that was another film that we got to do. And we had a whole premiere, and it was a fun first experience. I will never say the name of that film because I'm not going to have anyone look it up.
So this is while you're...
When I'm 15, 16, yeah.
And so, I mean, how did that kind of experience of acting and obviously being introduced to a whole new industry, right? I mean, something at such a young age. What was the good side to it, and what were the challenges? Because age, I think, is obviously the kind of maturity that one has at this age. They don't have that at 15. You're navigating a new space. Of course, you're excited. It's a new career. It's what you've always wanted. Yeah. But on the other side, I mean, there's also challenges. So tell us kind of about both sides.
Honestly, the minute I got on set, I fell in love.
Okay.
And I was just like a little kid in a playground. And whenever my scenes, I was one of the 7 leads in that film. So whenever I wasn't shooting my part, I was still on set, watching the director do what he was doing, the producer, seeing how everything was kind of coming to life to make this film. And I was very fascinated. I wanted to help. So I actually they do best girl, best guy in the credits at the end of the film production as to who was the most helpful on set. So both times I got best girl also credit for those because I was always ready to help. I was always ready to step in. So that was never, I think being on set and acting has never been, and that's how I know this is something that I want to, pursue for the rest of my life, on and off camera. But I think the biggest challenge that day was just I used to look a lot older when I was younger. And so I was casted as, the elder, high heel, fashionable, more mature girl. Yeah. So being in high heels going around a haunted house was probably the trickiest part of the whole experience. But no, I loved every part of it. And you become family when you're, with a group of people being silly and putting these stories together and playing these parts. And so it becomes a very cool experience if you embrace it.
So if I ask you, do you think actors are born, or do you think it's a skill set, it's a craft that one can learn? Because, some people say it's raw talent that, eventually that you have to cultivate, or is it just a skill like any other skill which you can pick up?
I think I would definitely say something that one of my acting coach says. He says, learning to become an actor is learning to be a professional human being. So when you're learning to act, you're learning about things you're ashamed of, things that make you feel insecure, things that scare you, that make you sad, that make you happy, that make you excited. You're exploring your feelings and emotions and breaking them down and breaking walls down so that you can play these characters and you can step into these worlds that you're building. Because if you're thinking about your insecurities while you're playing another character in a whole nother world, then that's going to get in the way of your performance. So you really have to do the inner work to be an actor. And I think that's been the most beautiful part about acting for me, is just learning to be more myself while becoming an actor. Yeah. So I would say that it is a skill that you have to learn, and the talent comes from how honest you can be with yourself, because it's not always going to be easy to look at the things that make you feel embarrassed and ashamed, but it's important because it's going to also project and reflect not only on your performance, but in your life. Like when I started acting and studying acting, I started showing up differently, not only on camera, but in my life. I was more confident. I was more fearless, even more fearless than I was when I was 15, so it really shaped me. And I think that everybody should take at least one acting class in their life, because it'll bring out things that you never even thought you would have had issues with. And it'll help you show up and shine brighter in your life.
That's such an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a very deep observation.
Yeah.
That, acting can have such a profound impact. And and I also think somewhere actors are good observers.
Yes.
Right?
People
I guess you have to
watchers.
be, because you channel different energies into your work.
Yeah. Mannerisms, and you're watching everything, right? You're like seeing the tics of people and mannerisms of people, and it's very, very interesting to me.
Yeah. Of course, I want to talk about your project Conception that was released a few years ago. Yes. Tell us a bit more about that. It's on Amazon Prime for anyone that wants to watch it. How did that project come about, and tell us a little bit about your experience on that set?
Yes, absolutely. So, I I've been lucky enough in Houston to where I've worked with certain directors early on, and they've recommended me to other directors. So I've kind of built my profile of work here like that. And I had one director, Tarun Verma, who approached me a few years before we even did Conception for another project. And I remember at that time I was living in New York, so I wasn't able to, even audition for the project. But he remembered me and again approached me for Conception a few years after that. And I remember I was traveling at the time, and I had to film my audition tape in a hotel room. And I got super excited about the part because it was my first. It was my first time doing a project like this of this, and also he was someone that I had been wanting to work with. Okay. So I was really excited about it. Submitted my audition the same day, and ended up getting the part. And he is a pharmacist in life, and also a director and writer. So he wrote the story about a couple going through IVF and trying to get pregnant, and going through complications of getting pregnant and what that does to the relationship and them individually. And it was really cool. He kept getting those experiences in his pharmacy, and then he decided to turn it into a script and a film. So we started off with a short film And the short film did so well that it turned into a feature. So we shot the other half and then, kind of put the two together. And he eventually got it on Amazon Prime. So it was a cool journey because I haven't had a director really push a project as far as he did. He was very determined, and he's a great director. He's very talented, and the whole team on there was phenomenal. So yeah, it was a very great experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And for anyone that wants to watch it, they can still watch it on Amazon Prime.
Absolutely.
So Simren, before we go on to talk about what you're doing now, which you're doing a lot of amazing things, so we want to talk about. But you're somebody that you've moved cities. You've spent the last 15 years, quote unquote, hustling.
Yes.
So I want to ask you that when you look back the last 15 years. And what stands out about your journey? Do you feel like now, in your early 30s, like, do you feel like you're finally in a position where you feel secure and stable, and then also like looking forward to the future?
Yeah, I turned 30 this month.
Okay.
And honestly, I'm so excited. I'm probably the only 30-year-old that's excited to be 30. But I'm really looking forward to this new decade because I feel like for the last 15 years, I've been trying to figure out where exactly I stand, not only in the industry, but in my own 2 feet in this world, in life. And like you said, I've hustled.
Yeah.
And, at first I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out with acting because, of course, I was trying to survive and pay bills and, just live. So acting was never 100%. I was never able to focus on it 100%, go after it 100%.
Yeah.
So I think now that I've figured out the surviving part, I really want to go into my 30s giving my dreams another shot and really going full force. And, even doing 1 foot in, 1 foot out, I've done certain projects that have really made an impact. And I'm just curious to see what this next decade or two looks like, having going full force. And it's interesting because when people first meet me or, even people that have known me, they just assume at first, she's had everything handed to her and she hasn't really had to work for things. Things just happen. And it's never been that case. I feel like I'm someone who goes after what I put my mind to, and I accomplish it because how strongly I believe in myself and I put my mind to it. And that is, sort of my luck. But I've never just had things handed to me.
Yeah.
I've been called spoiled, which is something that really upsets me because I'm the furthest thing from spoiled. I'll spoil myself now. But I've really had to work for things, and I'm grateful for that because it's built my backbone.
Yeah.
So
when you say, that going forward, you want to give your dreams another shot. What does that look like? I mean, if you envision the next 10 years, like what is Simren working on? Like, how is she feeling? Like, tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I will definitely continue to audition for projects in America, but I grew up on Bollywood.
Yeah.
I grew up on Bollywood films, and that is something that has always lingered. And the past few years, I've had certain thoughts about going to India and maybe, studying out there and seeing what happens from that. And luckily, God has placed some people in my life these past few years that can help me get there if taking the right moves and having the right talent and work ethic. So I believe the next step will be embracing India and potentially going out there to see, what that's like, and giving Bollywood a shot, as well as continuing to do things here. But I don't know, something in India is calling me, and I'm curious enough to go after it and crazy enough to go after it.
Yeah.
So that's what that looks like. And directing.
Yeah.
Directing, when I was an acting coach for 3 years for over 300 students from 12 to 65 years old, that's where the director in me came out.
Yeah.
And now having this media company and being a creative director of it, I've just deepened that relationship and that identity as a creative director. And so I would like that to translate to filmmaking and, get in the producer and director side of things as well as the writing.
Yeah.
So that's the next decade.
So Simran, you just mentioned, the media company that you run.
Yes.
So obviously that's a whole different side of you. And you mentioned that you never obviously formally studied business or, did the typical things that people do before setting up a business.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of get that idea that this is what I wanted to do, and from conceiving it to actually setting up a system, and obviously you're growing it as we speak. So tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I'll tell you, it took a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
It took a lot of falling on my face. And not only me, my team suffered also for some time, but they hang in there, and they're all still with me today. So it's been quite the journey. But I was waiting tables for the longest time because I thought that's what I had to do as a struggling artist trying to make it. So I waited tables in LA, New York, Houston, just busting my butt, auditioning at the same time. And a few years ago, I had people start approaching me about my social media. And I've always been very passionate about content and, sharing things on social media because, again, entertaining people, right? So that came very naturally to me. And I started getting approached by companies to come speak to their company about social media and content creation and marketing and do webinars. And they were willing to pay me like loads of money for this at the time. And so I was like, okay, wait, what? What? How much are you going to pay me to come talk to your company about social media?
Yeah.
And that's when kind of a light bulb went off in my head. And I realized that there was something there that I could leverage. Something that I was naturally good at.
Yeah.
And so I started working with another social media company, and I had a few experiences with other employers, learned the ropes, and really got to know what that looked like. And then eventually I wanted to do things my way. So I decided to start my own company 2 years ago, and it was the best decision I've ever made. It changed my life.
Yeah.
And it gives me the freedom now to go after this dream, without having to worry about paying bills and not eating cheese and bread sandwiches. So it's been quite the journey, but I'm
How
grateful
have
for
you
it.
seen the social media landscape evolve? Because I feel like, it's changing at the speed of light.
Yeah.
And, of course, that people that need, especially traditional companies that have historically not found the need to really do, focus on social media, now they do. And they have people like you who help them through the whole process. But how have you seen social media evolved? And, if you have any thoughts about the future, where this is headed?
Honestly, I feel like social media is being made so much more complex than it actually is.
Okay.
And for me, it started off with, to be completely honest, my whole page was just 2,000 quotes and poems and little sayings. I had probably 5 pictures out of the 2,000 of me on my social media before. And it was all about bringing light to people at that time for me. And eventually I archived everything and I started posting more when my life got a little more exciting when I moved to LA and stuff.
Yeah.
But doing it as a business now is very interesting. And I've been struggling with this myself, where I have kind of taken a step back from creating the content that I love to create and bringing that light to people through my content in the way that I want to.
Yeah.
And it's become more of a transaction. And it upsets me in a way because, I feel like it's getting crowded with businesses that are just trying to sell people things but not actually bring people value. And that's what it was for me in the beginning. So I think that the formula to win will and has always been, will be, and is bringing value to people. It's bringing light to people. It's giving something without expecting something in return, and then leaving the door open so that people that do want to invest in you find you. Because when you're on social media, anyone can find you.
Yeah.
But if you're not allowing yourself to be seen, then nobody will find you. And if you're constantly pushing ads down people's throats, asking for things, you're going to blend in with the rest of the people that are doing that.
Yeah.
So I think people are afraid to allow themselves to be seen. And I think that's all you need to succeed on social media, is allow yourself to be seen in your truth.
Yeah.
And maybe you're afraid of your truth. So then maybe you need to have a conversation with yourself. And maybe you're afraid of your business's truth. Then maybe you have to reevaluate your business.
Yeah.
But if you're not afraid, then I think if you allow yourself to be seen as a person or a business, then you will get the most rewards out of social media.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree. I feel like, I guess the word for that is just being authentic, right?
Exactly.
And as you said, a lot of people have a hard time being that way, and especially on social media where
Yes.
everything looks manufactured.
Yeah.
And I think the real way to stand out, as you're saying, is creating value for others
Yes.
and being authentic in yourself. And I guess that comes through a long journey of growth and self-acceptance, which I guess everyone has to go into each their own. So Simran, lastly, if there's a young woman watching this show, what do you hope that they learn from your journey?
I'll leave you with this story.
Okay.
I went to Pakistan for the first time 4 to 5 years ago. And we had a housekeeper who was about 15 years old working in the house that we were staying at.
Yeah.
And I remember us talking, and she was like, my dream is to go to school and be a doctor. But my parents want me to get married and have kids. And I can't go to school to be a doctor. I have to just be a wife and have kids. And I thought to myself, here I am, with the freedom to do whatever I want, go after whatever dream I want. I grew up with my mom telling me I'm going to go to Harvard and be a doctor or go to law school or whatever it is. And I had the freedom and the privilege to say, no, I'm going to go after what I want to go after. I'm going to build and live the life I want to live. In that moment, I felt so just, I guess, grateful, but also sad, because I couldn't believe that I had overlooked this opportunity that I had. And I know I've been going after my dream, but I feel like after I came back from Pakistan that time, I started going even harder after my dream. My company came after that experience. All these experiences came after that experience. So I would say, if you have the freedom to choose how to build your life, choose it. Choose freedom. Choose your choice, because you will either resent the people that force you to live a life other than what you want to live one day, or you're going to, maybe fight with them for a little bit because they don't disagree with your path now, but one day they may respect you for being courageous like they never had the courage to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say, go after whatever it is that lights your soul on fire.
That's such a great message. And I think, a big part of that is just accepting the fact that you even have a choice.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people find it hard to even think that they have a choice. So again, that's a great message. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Hum TV, for providing us with this platform. And thank you to our sponsors for sponsoring the show. See you next time with a new episode and a new guest.